Well, it was a hard day around here today. Um, I was going to do my first flame wheel mission where the platform, I have to trust it to do its thing autonomously and actually go out of sight and return. And I failed. I actually messed up pretty good. Totally a brain problem on my part. My intention was to fly from the house right here just up to this little set of condos right here in the corner of Bent Creek Ranch Road and return to home and land, which it should have done really well, and I can tell now it would have done really well. Somehow I had a brain fart, and instead of seeing the condos as here, I set up the mission to go all the way up to here. For some reason I felt this was I mistake this area for my intended area down here, and the results were quite devastating. I'll show you exactly how the mission went. I don't usually do a lot of these real time, but I will do this one and show you how it did go. Okay, armed, ready to go, stabilize mode, and I flipped the auto switch. And you can see here it's going up to the predefined 300 feet. I wanted to stay above all the trees and the power lines, etc. This was my first one where I was just going to trust the platform. Here you can see it's at 300 feet, and off she goes. Like I say, I should have been going from this point right here to this point right here and back, and I would have been fine. Wind was blowing really badly, so you'll see the copter moves around in the heads-up display here, and it's also kind of laid over on its left side because of the direction the wind was blowing, but it's still, and I'm only letting it run at like 5 miles an hour, so trying to conserve battery. So off she goes. Now my telemetry only works about 1,500 meters. My RC works well beyond that. My RC probably goes about 6 miles. I kept backing up towards the road, trying to keep it in sight as long as possible. These trees right here are quite tall. I had marked this as a 10-minute platform, even though it ran about 15 to 17, 15-ish. I also raised my failsafe voltage up quite higher than it needed to be. I could have had it at 12. It may have made it back home if I had not had the failsafe voltage so low. Seeing I was only going to run about 2/3 the battery out, I figured I'd run the failsafe voltage up and let it kind of automatically do that time period on its own in case I forgot. Locked up with 9 satellites. Battery current's low. Voltage is nice, not sagging. About 3 minutes 26 seconds in now. Staying right at 300 feet. And about 4.5, 5 miles per hour ground speed. Really, really doing well. I made several mistakes besides mistaking my intended waypoint 2 out there being about 3 times as long as the flight I wanted to fly. At this point you may hear in the background that my telemetry fell out. I was more than 1,500 feet away. It's a
No data for 10 seconds.
It's a $50 telemetry radio.
Warning. No data for 15 seconds.
For $200 I can get a
Warning. No data for
15 kilometer telemetry radio. So I just decided to hang out,
heading to waypoint 2.
and
Speed is
you may be able to hear
no data for 10
telemetry came in and out depending on
no data for 15
skip.
seconds.
Lots of technical reasons we won't get into.
Warning. No data for 20 seconds. Warning. No data for 25 seconds. Warning. No data for 30 seconds.
So I'm here at the 5-minute mark, which is 300
No data for
seconds.
35 seconds.
That's where I should have
Waypoint 2. Ground speed is for
flipped the
warning.
return
No data
to
for
launch
14 seconds.
button. Let it just come right back
Warning. No data for 47 seconds.
and land.
Warning. No data for 52 seconds.
Seeing I knew it was a 15-minute bird, I decided to go for 6 minutes.
Warning. No data for 62 seconds.
And that would have been a 12-minute,
Data for
would have
58
been 3 minutes underneath my 15.
Ground speed is for warning. No data.
But I had that other brain fart of having moved the failsafe voltage higher,
80 seconds.
so it would not have made the 15 minutes.
Warning. No data for 85 seconds.
I know that might not make much sense to you. I'll show you
No
that in
data
a
for
second.
90 seconds.
So at this
Warning.
point,
95 seconds.
I'm at the 6-minute mark and I'm starting to sweat
No
it.
data for 100 seconds.
Now if you watch right here,
Waypoint 2. Ground speed.
it will change from auto.
Warning. No data for 107 seconds.
I finally gave up
data for
around the
112
we'll find out exactly
No data
here in
for
a second.
117 seconds. Warning. No data for 122 seconds. Warning. No data for 127 seconds. Warning. No data for 132 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for warning. No data for 140 seconds. Warning. No data for 145 seconds. Warning. No data for 150 seconds. Warning. No data for 155 seconds.
I don't have any telemetry at this point, as you can
No data
hear.
for 160 seconds.
I'm just going on
Warning. No data for
mental.
165 seconds.
I can see now I went well over my
Ground speed is for warning. No data for 173
half,
seconds.
50% voltage limit. Still in auto mode at
No
this
data
point.
for 178 seconds. Warning. No data for 183 seconds. Warning. No data for 188 seconds. Warning. No data for 193 seconds.
I was trying to hang out and be cool.
Warning. No data for 198 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for warning. No data for 206 seconds. Warning. No
this
data
right
for
here is
11 seconds. Warning. No data for
when I switched it into RTL at the 6-minute mark, which it's past now, you won't see this change because telemetry is not connected.
Warning. No data for 231 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for
It did RTL
39 seconds.
and it did come back into
Warning.
telemetry range. We'll see that here in a second.
Warning. No data for 249 seconds.
That's 4 minutes.
Warning. No data for 250 per second.
And because it reorients it,
No data for
it actually
250
oriented the antenna such that
No data for 260 per second.
telemetry range was longer.
Ground speed is for warning. No data for 272 seconds. Warning. No data for 277 seconds. Warning. No data for 282 seconds. Warning. No data for 287 seconds. Warning. No data for 292 seconds. Warning. No data for 297 seconds.
Coming up on the 10-minute mark.
Waypoint 2. Ground speed is for warning. No data for 305 seconds. Warning. No data for
I was definitely worried at this point. There you go. Oops.
warning. No data for 315 seconds.
600 seconds.
No data for
Airtime
320
will be
seconds.
10 minutes.
Warning. No data for 325 seconds. Warning. No data for 330 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for warning. No data for 338 seconds. Warning. No data for 343 seconds. Warning. No data for 348 seconds. Warning. No data for 353 seconds. Warning. No data for 358 seconds. Warning. No data for 363 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for
I was still trusting that my return to launch was in fact bringing it back.
warning. No data for 376 seconds. Warning. No data for 381 seconds. Warning. No data for 386 seconds. Warning. No
We're
data
over the
for
10-minute and
391
39-second mark here now, so
Warning. No data for 396 seconds.
I knew things were in bad shape.
Ground speed is for warning. No data for 400 per second. Warning. No data for 409 seconds. Warning. No data for 414 seconds. Warning. No data for 419 seconds. Warning. No data for 424 seconds. Warning. No data for 429 seconds.
Now we'll go back and recalculate where it did get to when I hit RTL based on its speed and stuff.
437 seconds. Warning. No data for 442 seconds. Warning. No data for 447 seconds. Warning. No data for 452 seconds. Warning. No data for 457 seconds. Warning. No data for 462 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2. Ground speed is for warning. No data for 470 seconds. Warning. No data for 475 seconds. Warning. No data for 480 seconds. Warning. No data for 485 seconds.
So this is 12 minutes in.
497.
Only 3 minutes left.
Warning. No data for 495 seconds. Vernon heading to waypoint 2.
And it comes back into range. You can see the RTL did function.
To RDL.
telemetry picked back up because it was oriented towards me,
12%.
and the battery was down to 11%. Not good for as far as it needed to come back. So with that in mind, let's zoom in a little bit here on it.
Vernon heading to waypoint 3. Ground speed is for
Still at 300 feet. Coming back.
Vernon warning. Battery at 13.88 volt. 8%.
And I could have set that to 12. And we can see she's coming. Return to launch here. Down to 6% battery. Fighting the wind.
Heading to waypoint 3. Ground speed is for
Second here, we're going to see a battery fail safe. It'll come up right here on the heads up display at that time.
battery at 13.41 volt. 5%.
Really bad. Fail safe. So now you see it's coming down. And it fail safed so badly.
Vernon heading to waypoint 3. Ground speed is for
Still up, still coming.
Vernon warning. Battery at 11.81 volt.
Battery's now down to 1%, down to 10. Now it's no longer got enough voltage to fly, and it starts falling out of the air, basically from 300 feet. And there we have the end of the whole shooting match, basically.
Waypoint 3. Ground speed is 7.
And
No data for 10 seconds.
the
Vernon warning. Battery at 8.
it was
0%.
on the ground at that
No data
moment.
for 20 seconds.
Let's shut this off and go back to here. I searched and searched and searched for it. First I went to here, I was looking for it, couldn't find it. There was a lady here, was a little bit upset. I'm looking for a drone. Oh, so you're taking pictures of the neighborhood? No ma'am, I was practicing for search and rescue. That seemed to completely change her attitude. It was pretty funny though. 3 minutes later, while I was sitting and trying to figure out, looking in the trees around here, because I suspected it was in here, she gets in her car and leaves with her basement door wide open. If she'd really pissed me off, or I was a no good human, just gone in and taken all her stuff. Don't be asinine to people and then leave your house wide open. But she changed her attitude when I was nice to her. It happens a lot. So I kept looking here in this general area. I drove around and down to Paul Creasman, came down this road and was in this area right here when a gentleman came out of this trailer. Got on a gator, pulled right up here where my truck was, and he and I started talking because he owns all this property. His mother lives out this road in this house here. His father had just died. He rents all these trailers. Basically all this property here is his. He went with me. I followed him down this road. He offered to help. We stopped here, and at that time there was enough battery voltage left in it to where my little bitty telemetry, it would lock up, but because the GPS was destroyed in the crash, couldn't get a GPS position on it. He and I walked up through here, went down and ran his fence line all the way down through here, all the way through here, trying to find it, but didn't. Came back up here and I left. He wants to buy one for deer hunting. So I came back, I printed this out, and my orientation was a little strange. So I went back and actually started flying in this curve. For some reason, I felt it was in this curve of that area, but I couldn't match up the road. This gentleman in this house came out, we talked. This gentleman was pretty nice too. I came back to the house and got the other quad, went and put the camera on it, took it back up there. I flew it over these trees right here, thinking I had this area over here confused with this area here. So I flew over these trees, and that's when this gentleman came out of his house. The quads and the drones, the verticals are so noisy. At 300 feet they would never notice it, but down at 50 to 60 feet you can't sneak up on anything. So I flew in this area and photographed the top of these trees so I could go back and look at it. The gentleman in this house started telling me that he thought I had a picture printed out from this telemetry that was successful of this area, and he kept telling me, I think you're in the wrong area. I really do think you're in the wrong area. And my flight with the GPS of that flight was off, and I was actually disoriented in the rotation of my thinking of where I was at by about 90 degrees. I'll show you that little bitty flight here in a second, but I'll finish up here. I went and printed out a picture of this telemetry so I could bring it back to here. That didn't work. So I came back with the other quad and I parked in this man's driveway, went up and knocked on his door to ask to fly from his property. He didn't come to the door. His dogs did. So I went and I flew in the public road over these trees with the camera pointed down, and I was on my way to go back to the house and look at that video to see if I could see it in the trees. Well, that's when this gentleman came out and we talked. And then this gentleman came back home. He actually didn't answer the door because he wasn't there, and we all talked for a little bit of a period of time, and I showed them how the quad flew. They were both extremely interested in it. Very nice people, extremely nice people, both of these guys. This guy even wants to buy one himself. This gentleman here told me I had my orientation wrong, and he thought what I was really had printed out was down in this area. So I took his word for it, and I drove around here and back down here, and as I pulled over in the truck in the grass right here to start looking and see if I could connect and locate it, lady came out of this driveway and kind of slowed down near my truck, and I walked around, and she says, "Are you looking for something?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm looking for a drone." And she says, "Well, you know, it's right over there in my yard." And I looked over, and right behind this tree, which this tree is about 6 or 8 foot tall, it was laying right here in the grass. She said my husband was out after he mowed leaf blowing, and he turned around and looked, and suddenly it was laying there on the ground. So she put it up on some Facebook type of site, and she said, "I'll go ahead and knock that down." And I told her how much I appreciated it, and then I walked over here and picked up the parts from here. The camera came off. GPS was pretty much really kind of messed up. Broke the top plate in 2 places, the bottom plate in 3 places. I basically lost a $79 compass, $84 battery, and have a $50 frame to replace. About $213 worth of damages. So probably the velocity from falling from 300 feet here brought it in here. I basically found all the parts. The camera on it did not record. I've since found out why that was. Not going to go into details on that. But I did recover it all. I will be rebuilding it because it was really just so sweet. So there's you some brain farts, and really pretty depressed over the mistake I made and the fact that I got a lot of rebuilding to do to get her back like she was. She was really sweet at that point, but in truth, I met a gentleman here that was really nice. One here who's really nice, who probably wants to buy a drone. I met the owner of this property, which I think because he wants to use one deer hunting and wants to get in touch. We exchanged phone numbers and such. He wants to get in touch and learn about how he might be able to use one deer hunting in South Carolina. I think I'm going to be able to use this field now for future things, which is going to be much more spacious than down here at the house. So overall, I'm going to call it a D. It's pretty close to a D minus. We might even call it D minus. Pretty much a failure, but overall, I think I'm going to pull it up to a D minus because of the relationship I established with this guy, and the gentleman that owns this property. He probably owns these trailers down in here too. Who knows? He may own more property there, and where he lives in Candler, he may own even more. I'm not sure what he's doing in these two buildings. I will find out later. Who knows what's going on in there and what kind of relationship could develop from this. So that's a little bit of what went on. Let me go on to a different track and show you a little more what I was talking about. So this is when I came back with the quad, and you can see I took off. Now this is me getting it stabilized, moving away from these branches, getting it high enough in the air to do my thing, because I wanted to look at these trees in this area. So here I am going out over the trees with the camera on that platform pointed down, and I'm going up and down looking as best I can at the trees alongside the road. I'm at 165 feet, so I have to drop that down a little bit. Down to 145. So now I'm pretty ready to start looking around for it. So down to 129 feet, 118. So now we're not too high. Down to 76 feet. Time to go above the trees. So at 75-ish feet, I start going into the trees, looking down with the camera that's on it, and recording what I can see in the trees. So you can see here, I go back and forth, looking in these trees. Just flying above all the trees at about 100 feet, and taking a picture of what might be in the top of them for reviewing later. That's when this gentleman came out of this house because he heard the noise from the quadcopter.
Battery at 9.5 volt, 72%.
So at this point I was checking out the tree that's right below it now.
Vernon heading to waypoint home. Ground speed is 1.
And that
Vernon,
pretty
change
much
to RDL.
gave me everything I needed, so I hit return to launch and
Vernon, warning, battery
let it come back to
66%.
where the truck was parked. And then the gentleman that came out of this house and I had quite a bit of discussion. He actually told me that he thought I was in the wrong corner of the square. Yeah, almost landing down to 70, 60 feet, coming in.
Battery at 9.32 volts, 60%.
40 feet, 30. So now it's basically landing. And what this gentleman told me is by what I had on the map,
Ground speed is 0.
and which we can both see now, I was in the wrong curve with this. It was, as we found out later, it was sitting right behind this tree right here, and my other
8.9
telemetry was correct. So I ended up talking to him for a while, and because he told me he felt my picture showed this area, I left, went around here and went down there and actually found it. So real quick we'll look at what should have been and what actually was. Let's see, where's my ruler? Here's my ruler. So I should have flown from let's see what happens if I leave it in miles right now. I should have flown from approximately right here to right here and back, which was 1/4 of a mile. Instead, the point I set up was to here, which was 3/4 of a mile, 3 times farther. Not going to make it with that quad set up the way it was. Just not going to happen. So it was 3 times what I had intended. We'll get her back together and we'll see if we can play in this field. I know I can play over here in this gentleman and this gentleman here. I'll develop the relationship. I'll have to see who lives in this house. Plus I still have the large acreage in Fort. There's another field down there that's almost 300 acres. A lot of trees on that one. And then I got the other 140 acres at the campground. Just got to playing around here at the house. Got a little froggy. Sometimes that bites you in the butt. Yeah, it's all for this one.